Hi, welcome back to Not So Obvious Watches. I'm Pete McConville. Welcome to my slightly changed format. You might have noticed I've kind of stopped doing my weekly reviews of all watch media, watch industry and watch reviews. I'm going to shift this to be a rolling monthly, where each week I look at what's happened in the watch media the last month, what's happened next week. It'll be what's happening in the watch industry over that month, and then the next week it'll be what new watches have come out in that month, and I'll keep that rolling in that kind of cycle. I trialed this, and the last one I did was just the media that I'd seen in the previous month, and I'm finding it's a lot more focused and I can get through it a bit quicker. Today's video is new watch releases over the last month, principally in August. Now I'm not going to talk about the new Seiko 5 line, which clearly did come out in August. I did a whole video on that already. I'll put a link in the show notes. If you're interested in my thoughts about that, go there. In general, I like it. I think it's a smart play for Seiko. Okay, so the other thing I should say is this is not going to cover every watch that was released. It's going to really just cover the things I think are kind of interesting. So with no further ado, let's get into this. And the first probably big watch news from the Swatch group would be the new Omega Aqua Terra Ultralight. Now essentially this is a 41mm, 55 gram, 5000 G, 15,000 Gauss rated Aqua Terra. Doing a similar kind of role with all of those specs, kind of similar to some of like the really high-end Richard Miles, except whereas those things sort of fall apart and get frightened if you show them a glass of water, this thing's got a full 150 meter water resistance, and whilst expensive at $40,000, isn't a quarter of a mil like a Richard Mille. So it's an interesting thing. There's all sorts of funkiness going on with this watch, using a lot of new, well, not completely new, but a new to watches titanium aluminium alloy that they call gamma titanium. I'm actually seen this used before in aircraft engines, so as I said, it has been around for a little while, but first time I've seen it being used in this kind of application. They make a big deal about the fact that this has been designed with Rory McIlroy, a golfer, and golf is typically regarded as one of those sports that's really quite tough on watches because of the whole swing and then the G-shock that comes through as you hit the ball. So it kind of makes sense to tie that up. And he could afford it because this watch, as I said, is going to cost near as damn it to $50,000 US. So this is not going to be an inexpensive watch. As you can imagine, the cost of this watch has been a really big point. I don't think, though, it's actually relevant because I don't think that this watch is actually designed to be sold. Now, the ID guy has done a whole video about the design of this. Again, I'll put a link in the show notes to that video. He touches on the design and how this design has come together really well. He's he's an industrial designer by trade, so he's way better at talking about the design side than I am. So go check him out. His theory is that this is like a prototype of some new technologies that's been brought to market. I don't disagree with that. I don't discount it completely. I think it's a little bit different though. I sense that this watch is a marketing flex. This watch is Rolex, sorry, take that back, but Freudian slip. This watch is Omega saying, look what we can do. I see this as sort of part of a continuum with the Ultra Deep that came a little while ago. And this is Omega flexing and moving quite forcefully into that space of ultimate tool watch, which frankly Rolex, hence my Freudian slip, is kind of retreating from. Rolex is trying to get out of being a solely steel manufacturer, is putting more and more emphasis on its gold, its two-tone, its gem sets, realizes it can't sell more watches, so the only way it can increase its value is to sell more expensive watches. It can't keep selling more expensive watches if it overemphasizes its entry-level steel sports ranges. So that's kind of leaving the field open for Omega to expand into and claim that space. And Omega's not particularly interested. Well, rephrase that, Swatch Group isn't interested in having Omega chase Rolex up that chain. I think they're quite happy for Omega to grow into that sort of super sport, super tool zone that Rolex used to own. And as Rolex moves up, all Rolex really does is increase the profile of its new competitors, and they would be Blancpain and Breguet and Jacques Dro. These watch brands which Swatch has, which Swatch could make enormous amounts of money out of, but tend to be forgotten a little bit. By having them compete with Rolex, paradoxically, they actually increase their visibility, and I think would be better for Swatch. So I see this as part of some strategic positioning of Omega taking over that super tool phase that Rolex used to own, allowing Rolex to move, or encouraging Rolex to move out of that space and increase the focus on Swatch's more expensive brands. Sticking with Swatch, now let's go across to Longines and the new Longines Master Collection MOONPHASE. Now this is a watch I can appreciate but not really love, because as I've said in previous videos, MOONPHASEs aren't really my thing. They're kind of just a little bit too dressy, a little bit too blingy for me. And that's a deal breaker for me, but I can still appreciate that this is a really nice watch. And all in all, that's probably the word I would use. It's a nice watch. It's kind of classic, but then it's also kind of modern. It's kind of blingy. So it's a little bit of everything. And I think Longines is really aiming at a kind of a Goldilocks watch here. But more than that, I think they're aiming at a Goldilocks watch that covers lots of bases. Like, so there's 15 styles in this, and it comes in two different sizes, a 40 and a 42. And if you look at the different kinds of varieties, and I'll put two pictures up here, they really are hitting a kind of a couples watch or a unisex watch or a crossover watch here. I think this is Swatch really trying to build on what I sense is a growing unisex genderless watch, or a watch which can be used by lots of different people. And what I really like here is they haven't necessarily just made a men's watch a bit smaller. So they're not trying to necessarily just hook up on some sort of lazy boyfriend's watch where they say, we'll make a watch that a guy will wear, but we'll shrink it to 38mm and punch it out. Instead, what they seem to have done is said, we're going to make a men's watch, but then we might shrink it a little bit and we'll play with it a little bit and we'll bling it by putting some diamonds on it, but we'll still keep some clearly masculine accents, so that this is a watch which can genuinely be seen by each gender as their watch, not it's a men's watch that's just been made a bit smaller. And I think that's an interesting move by Longines, picking up on a trend that I sense is, if not here, that is coming. And the reason I sense this is coming is because of the next watch, which is the Panerai Diver. Now, the Panerai Diver has been roundly condemned by the Paneristi and a lot of big macho Western kind of watch reviewers. They don't like it. This is very much Panerai getting out of their swim lane. It is smaller. It's only got a 30. It's often smaller. It's only got a 30 meter water resistance. It's dive styled, but it's not a diver. All of this has meant that it's come in for an enormous amount of criticism. And yet, the rumour seems to be that it sells very well. So well, in fact, that rather than do what everyone's telling Panerai to do, which is to beef it up and give it a proper water resistance and get back in their swim lane, Panerai have doubled down and introduced a new 6 versions of this watch. There's some new colours, some new materials, both titanium and gold, and a new feature. So there's now a GMT version. It's not cheap. Cheapest version of this is going to come in at 5,900 euros. It goes up to 11,800 euros for the titanium GMT model, all the way up to 14,900 for the gold. And as I said, whilst everyone else has been kind of either hammering Panerai about this and saying they have to change it, or at best making kind of patronizing remarks about, well, maybe it's going well in the Asian market, as I said, Panerai have doubled down on this, and they're going hard. It's clearly working for them. I see this as a bit of a middle finger to a lot of those kind of watch geeks ordering Panerai to get back in their lane and saying, screw you guys, we're going to go into that general kind of both genders, unisex crossover watch that can be worn by everyone at all times. And again, that's why when I was talking about with the Longines, that kind of sense I'm getting, that gender-free, unisex crossover, use whatever language you want to use, is the thing that's coming next. I think that is the trend. And it doesn't stop with the big boys. When we get right down to the smaller ones, we see yet another example of this sort of crossover and gender neutral watches coming through. So now we've got at the very other end the anOrdain Model 2. Now this is popping up in a few places, but I'm going to take this this review from Monochrome. So it's a small, well-made watch, kind of classical with some early 20th century quirkiness, and a unique selling proposition of this Grand Fou enamel dial. Inside it, there's nothing special, just a Sellita SW210 hand-wound movement. Now, if you combine all of this, if you combine the typography and the hand winding and the enamel and the vintage sizing, it's only a 36mm. And this is the perfect watch to wear to that inner city hipster cafe with the mixed matched furniture and the barista with the leather apron and the bushranger beard. It's also the perfect watch for you to buy for your girlfriend, so that you might want to borrow it sometimes. Or if you're a girl, it's the fantastic watch to buy for yourself, and you can sort of sneak it into the house saying to your boyfriend or husband, you can wear it too. And in many cases, he will want to. But putting that aside, there's something else that really needs to be mentioned. All of that itself creates a fairly compelling case to buy this watch. But then combine that with a €1,000 price, and you've got something really quite unusual. That size, that typography, that styling, that enamel dial, all of that for just €1,000 is something of a bargain, and a really compelling option from this small Scottish brand. As I said, so far what I'm seeing is lots of these sort of crossover, gender neutral, unisex, use what language you want watches coming through, and there seems to be particularly something in the air in England at the moment, because here's another watch that fits into that category. This is the Ferriss Stanhope, 37mm hand wound cushion case, little sweetie of a watch, apparently named after an 18th century woman, Lady Hester Stanhope, known for what was then the manly pursuits of traveling the world and places like the Middle East and discovering new things and doing new stuff. If there's a better example of kind of this crossover story of a woman doing manly things, I can't think of it. And it's really strikes me as capturing that emerging zeitgeist and putting it into a watch. It's a classic Farah design, clearly from the same company that brought us the Ponting and the Lander. So you're getting this sort of an interesting whimsy in colours and textures, whilst at the same time being really disciplined and paying a lot of attention to detail in the build and the execution. So that's something of a Farah hallmark, and it carries through on this watch. Again, like the anOrdain, it's coming at what I think is a pretty reasonable price. It's a nice watch, nice movement. If it's like the other Farahs in the hand, it's going to be really well made, and it's $1,200. That's not bad. Now, if all this gender neutral crossover stuff has just been a little bit too much for you and you need to get your masculinity on, Seiko has you covered, because Seiko's bringing back the ARNI. The ARNI is back. It's a reintroduction of the 1982 hybrid sort of Digi diver thing that was famously worn by Arnold Schwarzenegger in the movie The Commando. It's a Prospex watch, solar, ISO certified, etc., etc. And it's massive, 47.8, so the best part of 48mm across. Massive, great bezel shroud, giving a huge wrist presence. Paradoxic, or maybe not paradoxically, because it's like most Seikos, it's super short. It's almost got a lugless design, which will mean that it'll still fit on a lot of wrist. Might look a bit odd, but it will just about fit on according to the Worn and Wound site, they tried it on people down to 6 3/4 and it fit fine. So I don't think this is going to be a problem. I think it is actually a really interesting alternative in an area that G-Shock had very much made its own. So it really does present a viable alternative to most of the G-Shocks that you have sort of rattling around at that area. It's available now with a with an MSRP of $525 to $550 US. If it's anything like any other Seikos, and assuming it's in production for a little while, this will get considerably cheaper in about a year or so on Amazon. Sticking with both manly and affordable, Citizen have brought out a new range of automatic divers, which they haven't done for a while. So the new PROMASTER MECH diver and PROMASTER Marine Super Titanium are out. Guess what they're made of? Okay, so it's not that hard to guess. Obviously, the straight PROMASTER MECH is steel, and the one with titanium is made of, well, titanium. They're big but not outlandish, 42mm for the steel and 43.8 for the titanium. That's relatively common. You look at most watches will get a little bit larger when they're made from titanium. For all its advantages, in order to get the same strength, you often do need to make the cases just a little bit larger. Fairly generic kind of Asian mainstream diver styling, but with just enough classic Citizen cues to be clearly itself. Things like those Citizen use that quite distinct sort of semi-skeletonized hand, those kind of blocky, truncated trapezoidal indexes, and that odd crown at the 8 o'clock. Those are all kind of Citizen signatures. So like I said, the design's a little bit generic. It's a little bit kind of Orient, low-end Seiko, but I think it's unique enough that it does stand out. Lots of color choices. Now this is being made in a couple of different region-specific areas. So there's Southeast Asian versions and European versions, but this is also the 21st century, and there's this thing called the internet, which will pretty much allow anybody to buy anything with a bit of Google searching. So I reckon this will be available. In terms of prices, it's actually pretty reasonable. You're looking at between $250 up to about $450 for the titanium. And again, I'd strongly suspect that's going to get cheaper. So you're really looking at kind of Orient, Mako, Ray, and sort of potentially Seiko Samurai Turtle competitors in this watch. Finally, last but certainly not least, is the new Christopher Ward C60 Apex. Now this is a limited edition to mark 5 years of the release of their in-house SH21 movement. Only 100 pieces, which is kind of a shame because I really do like what they've done here. It's very distinctive whilst at the same time being a very now design in terms of, well, pretty much everything. At 42mm, it's a now size. That's a very contemporary size for a dive watch. Blue, which is a very contemporary color. We're all loving the blue. We're all loving these bright colors. And the other color that is routinely being used as accents right now is orange. And guess what the color accents in this watch are? Orange. It's very much the accent du jour color. It's not really skeletonized. I describe it more as kind of sculptural. That's like they've used. So normally with a skeletonized watch, what I'd say is you've got a standard watch, they've removed a bit and you can see the movement. With this, it's more like the movement from the very beginning. They've decided that we're going to use the movement as part of the display of the watch. Look, it's nowhere near the same quality. It's nowhere near the same level of execution. But I get the same sort of sense, the same feeling as, say, the Zenith Freak or a Debethune when I look at this watch. It's making the movement part of the display without simply doing a skeletonizing of the watch face. As I said, I'm not trying to compare the quality of those watches. It's more about the design feel. Overall, I really like this watch. I think it is a little bit, I'd like to see it in the flesh. The photos make it look just a little bit clumsy. I think orange, for example, does great as an accent, but there's perhaps a little bit too much orange here. I kind of, like I said, maybe I want to see more photos. I'd love to see one in the hand. I like where they're going. I like the design of this. I possibly would have liked just a little bit more maybe subtlety in the use of those accent colors, maybe a little bit more finesse in the design. Now it's 4,200 US bucks, and that's a shed load for a Christopher Ward. Probably more than I would pay, especially given my kind of reservations about how this thing looks right now. On the other hand, maybe it looks much better in the hand and the photos aren't doing it justice. B, it is a really cool thing. And C, whether you like it or not, this is a watch which is kind of a statement piece from Christopher Ward of saying, we are, if not now, we are intending to be a serious watch manufacturer with our own movements, our own design language, which is going to be consistent. We're going to keep it going, and you need to take us seriously. And I think this watch does a good job of achieving that. So anyway, that's it for me on my watch sort of roundup of watches through August. Did you see anything else that you thought was particularly interesting and you would like to talk about? Stick it in the comments below. I've been Pete McConville. This has been Not So Obvious Watches. Please subscribe to my channel so we can keep going. And if you want to get in contact with me, wait just a few seconds. A card is going to come up with my Instagram handle or my email address. Feel free to contact me either of those ways, and we'll have a chat if there's something else you want to talk about. Thanks very much. Bye.